Alright, we're the Cool Guys. I'm George.
And I'm David.
We're joined today with Andrew Montgomery. He's from Bell, Carrington, Price, and Gregg. He's an attorney.
Yeah. Awesome. And Andrew does real estate closing, so that's why we have him on here today. A little bit of an important piece of the process.
Yeah.
So Andrew, thank you for joining us. This is our podcast to talk really to first-time home buyers, young homeowners, people that maybe haven't bought a home in a long time and don't, just need a refresher course on things related to buying and selling a home, home ownership, that type of thing. And you kind of play a key role in that critical process, don't you?
I said before this, if I give you a thumbs up, that means I think your idea is crap.
I'm nodding my head with a thumbs up. Our good friend Ruby this morning. So good morning, Ruby.
Good morning.
How does that work? Does that look good to you? Yeah? We should have just kept going.
Absolutely, and I just bought my first home in 10 years, so it's like going through it all over again. So it's,
wow.
I see that again, and things I had definitely forgotten about just from the buyers. So.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how you ended up in Columbia practicing law.
Sure. I grew up in Houston, born and raised there, and came out to Columbia about 20 years ago now to go to USC, and loved it so much. I've been here ever since. It's just a great fit. So.
Yeah, well, these days the temperature, it's mid-June, and so it's about as hot as it is in Texas.
It's about, I don't know why, we had a great sense of pride growing up. Like, we're the hottest and the most humid. No, that's not a great thing, but it's, I was driving around in 100-degree weather yesterday, and it was good to have an extra shirt.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
So what made you pick the University of South Carolina to come do your education? Because there are some great schools in Texas.
Absolutely. I applied through a couple schools through the Southeast. My parents were from Louisiana and Mississippi, so I grew up watching SEC football. And, was always interested in a state school, but that had, a little bit of everything. And USC had a great business program that's still highly thought of. And that was a great selling point. And just really enjoyed it. Had a little bit of everything. It wasn't a 60,000 person university, but it was 20-something thousand at that time, and just right, and pretty girls and football and a business program. And Bob McNair, who owns the Texans, had a scholarship for out-of-state students, or who his family now owns it. But I was fortunate enough to receive one of those, so I'm always thankful for Mr. McNair and what he set up there, and that played a big part in my coming out here too. So.
Very good.
So what area of law do you focus? Is it just real estate, or what are your specialties?
Yeah, so these days, for me, 95% of my practice is residential transactions, real estate closings when people are buying and selling their homes. Over the years, practiced in a variety of different real estate related things. I did default service work for a few years, working with lenders and creditors. Did commercial transactions for several years, and then general real property litigation. But it's kind of always been kind of the same underlying concepts tie in regardless of what real estate practice area you're working in. A lot of it revolves around the study of the property, real estate title history, making sure things are clean for your clients.
Yes, sir.
And that was the same on the default service end as it is in the transactional end for people buying their homes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so in the state of South Carolina, not all states require that an attorney is involved in the process of buying and selling real estate, right?
That's right.
So why do you think South Carolina chooses to have an attorney involved in the process, and then what do you think the benefit of that is in the long run?
Right, and what you said, a lot of people don't realize that because there's only a handful of states where an attorney is required to supervise the real estate transaction.
Yep.
South Carolina is one of those, and it's something the Supreme Court has felt strongly about over the years. For 30 plus years, they've had opinions that have noted, an attorney needs to supervise, the real estate transaction. They've broken it down into some key areas that we're glad to talk about, but it's And it's always the underlying premise in those opinions is it's for the public good, kind of balancing, there might be cost associated with things versus, professional expertise and experience that's there for the public's best interest. And so it's an important thing, the purchase of your home is probably the biggest purchase of your life. So to have a good agent like you guys, good lenders, good closing attorney, all part of like the team that's working to protect that person and make sure that's a good experience for them.
Since an attorney is required, can you just walk us through what happens once your realtor puts their client in touch with you and how you go about working with the client?
Absolutely. So you guys have done, the hard work of the negotiations, getting to that point where you have the contract, and then you'll send it to the closing attorney's office. And while y'all are then going through things like the property inspections, the details during your due diligence on the property, we start working on our end, researching the history of the title of the property. And a lot of it, I think of in the terms of loan closing. Some people do pay cash, but a lot of people, the majority are, working with lenders.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll start coordinating with your lender, balancing all figures, getting things moving towards closing. Time-wise, that beginning process is the review of the title of the property, looking at the history of the property, seeing if everything is clean and marketable, so that the seller can sell the property and the buyer's taking a clean title. That can be, you're looking for title issues. Obviously, you don't want anything to come up, but it seems to when you look at enough pieces of property, you're bound to find some issues, and that can be anything from George and David and Andrew. We all own a piece of property several years ago, and then only George and David convey out the property. What happened to Andrew's interest and things like that you start looking into. Or I own a piece of property, I take out a mortgage, then I sell it to David, never pay off the mortgage, somehow it gets overlooked, then David's trying to sell the property to you. We've got to see what happened with that lien, and hopefully it's just something where a satisfaction wasn't filed a record. But it's those type of things. You're looking at a little bit of anything and everything. Our title search will look at easements, restrictions of record on the property, kind of go through anything that's a record affecting things, and then counseling your clients, seeing if it is an issue that needs to be addressed before closing, or explaining, yes, there's cable company has a right of way, but it's not going to affect your house.
Yes, so I want to back up and kind of take some of this apart a little bit.
Absolutely.
Just I'm thinking through the lens of somebody that George and I are working with, buying a house for the first time, right? And we like you said, we get to the point where we're getting you involved, and we say, well, the attorney's going to do a title search. So how far back do you start looking into the history of that problem, that property, to see if there are problems, and then maybe, what's the weirdest thing you've ever run into?
Oh, man. The kind of the standard title search period in South Carolina is 40 years.
40 years.
There's some statutes that talk about if somebody hasn't come forward over 40 years, their interest in the property isn't an issue from a practical standpoint.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the default period that people search on a residential property. On a commercial property, they search longer, might search 60 plus years.
Okay.
For my end, I like it when it's nice and clean. So I try to block some of the nasty stuff out of the head. But you'll have, it's kind of along the lines of what we were talking about a few minutes ago. You'll have 8 people on a chain of title, and then you have one person on your contract that says, "Hey, I own this. What about your 7, family members?" And this, "Oh well, 4 of them died 20 years ago, and they have kids out there, but we didn't think they'd be interested in the property. I've lived here. This has been my property." And that those things come up a good bit. We have folks that buy a property at a tax sale, and there's concerns that they haven't done steps maybe to make sure things are cleaned up after the tax sale, that they have 100% interest. So you might see somebody buy a property for a couple $1,000s and then try to sell it at the market value, but you still have to kind of see that everything's been done to get things in order. So, for me, the less exciting, the better. But it's sure things come up on a good bit. So.
Yeah.
When it comes to selling your home, is there a certain time when you suggest a power of attorney be used if your parents are going through a transaction, but let's say one of your parents has dementia or another instance where you feel as though it would be beneficial?
Yeah, and it's from that end, a lot of times you'll see it with folks that have like elderly family members, and you just want to make sure with like dementia aspects that they are at a state of mind that they know what they're signing off on in terms of the power of attorney. Don't want to go down too much of a rabbit hole, but if somebody didn't have mental capacity, then you'd be looking at court appointed things to make sure that somebody could act on their behalf. But in general, maybe it's just a case, your grandfather is too old to really come in to closing. Mm-hmm. But if he can have somebody, witness and notarize the power of attorney, that'll allow, somebody to come in on his behalf and sign for him. Yes. And you want that power of attorney to be the same as like a deed in terms of recordability. So that's why I mentioned you have a witness and a notary. And that's something you see pretty often. A lot of times people will structure it as just a very limited power of attorney. We have this one closing. I don't want you doing anything else on my behalf. I love you, but I don't trust you. But I am okay with you doing the documents for this one closing, and that's fine. And other times, it might be structured. There might be something the family's worried that, the mental health, the physical health is deteriorating, so they might have set up a more durable power of attorney, something that could be used over time for different things, bank account management, property, assets, things like that. So, and then other times you just see where one spouse, doesn't want to come in and says, hey, will you go sign for me? And you don't realize it when you agree it, but your hands, that's asking a lot of somebody. So you definitely owe somebody, a beer or a sandwich at least. Because you're writing out, especially on a loan package, you're writing out as attorney in fact for David every time I'm signing for him. And by the end, you're like, man, David,
that's a lot of
put one over on me. So yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned a lot of times, home buyers finance the purchase of a home, and we've seen a lot, particularly within a price range, from about $100,000 to say $350,000. A lot of cash transactions lately. What are the difference between the two on your end?
Yeah, the starting point, the title work, and kind of the research of the property is still the same foundation that we start with, but there's less time that's involved in the closing process. Now, a lot of closings, as you guys know, everybody's trying to work on a 30-day or less schedule, and with a cash closing, there are less things. If a buyer, your lender is researching your credit, things like that. If you go buy a finance account, that could throw a hurdle in that process, could delay things. And so with cash, things by nature just end up being quicker for I think all the parties involved. And I think that's something you guys probably counsel buyers and sellers on about. Hey, these are the pros and cons of a cash offer. And so it's a little bit simpler. A lot of our process, once title's clear, is coordinating with the folks' lenders, making sure everything's like in line and we balance on figures. Part of that attorney supervision of the closing is that we oversee the recording and disbursement of the funds. So, the funds come into the attorney's trust account. We handle the disbursements, the payoffs of people's loans, different liens that need to be cleared, getting the sellers their proceeds. So it's just one less step in the process. But unfortunately, I'm not at a point where I can do a cash closing for myself. I know a lot of people are not as well. So.
Yes, sir. So after they purchase the home, cash or financed, how important is it for the buyers to maybe take a step back and relook at their will?
Yeah, certainly something to think about, I guess, at all times. I think either, personally or somebody, you're always, even if you're your parent is 60 years old and in good health, you hear them say, "Oh well, I'm starting to box up the things in the room," and say, "Mom, don't worry about that. We got plenty of time." But so it's just getting things in order for you to have, and it's like, but it is something to think about, like, what do you want done with your property? And a lot of people at closings, decide to put something in the deed language that kind of goes past the probate court process. They want it to where, if you and I buy a house together and one of us passes away, we want it set up to where it passes to the other. So people will look at doing that on the front end, a deed that says, there's joint tenants with the right of survivorship. And that way they don't have to go through the probate court process. And if somebody hasn't done a will, then the probate court process might be a little bit longer. There's, you still have to see who the heirs are, what the probate court, the intestate interest, how things pass there. So it's definitely, if you haven't set it up towards, and maybe you just own a property in your own name, then you just want to make sure that your wishes for the property are seen through. Had somebody the other day where the one child helped their parent with $70,000 of gift funds to get a purchase. So the intention is for that child to have the property, not some of the siblings afterwards. So it's just something that you want to make sure that your interest and what your general plan is. So always good to have an estate plan. Although again, try to enjoy life too.
Yeah.
No need to pack up the room just yet. So
No, so and that goes just to the point. It just seems like a lot of time people, you mention the word attorney to people, and they just back up and go, "Really?"
Yeah, I do it too.
Why do I need to involve an attorney? And so I think a lot of times people miss the piece of you're an investment. Right? Because a little bit of work with you on the front end of things, like you said, if you're married and buying a house, designing the deed so that you can skip some legal things down the road should something happen to one spouse, or should something, God forbid, happen to both, and you need to leave it to the kids. And so I think it's good. We encourage people to, and we do some education with them about that while you're in this process of buying the home. They kind of set it up, right?
Absolutely. And one of the aspects we kind of touch on, it kind of happens organically. We're talking about the things that an attorney has to supervise, but one of them is like the overall closing, and that's being able to, sit with the buyer, borrower, go through the documents, explain things to them. You hear the public service announcements, like if you're going to the doctor, don't be afraid to ask. This is the time to ask questions, and your attorney's there to kind of guide you through that process, just like you guys are there to guide through. So it's important to look at those things.
Awesome.
Ruby Red's Pet Care is an in-home pet care service company providing invaluable services for pet owners, especially those who travel frequently or have long work hours. They offer dog walks and play sessions, pet sitting services, pet transportation, and more. To learn about their pawsome services, visit their website at rubyredspetcare.com.
So one of the questions I have for you, you work with a lot of real estate agents, right? And so George and I are always looking for advice on like how we can improve the service we deliver to clients, in the real estate process. So what from your perspective, what makes a good realtor? What should we focus on doing well with our clients that, makes this a much easier process for them?
Sure. I think in general, communication on a lens is key. And seeing what your respective client wants. Does your client want you calling them with updates and things, regularly, or they kind of more comfortable with, trusting your process, trusting things that say, we're working on it, and things will come together. Everybody has their own needs and preferences. And I think that's something important. And just being there for your client. I know you guys take phone calls at all hours of the night, and so, the weekend I always feel bad. I ask, so how was your weekend? So that's my my busiest time. I'm out showing houses and working with folks, and availability, communication. Those things are key. And it's as we all know, it's a very unique time right now in the market. The past few months, crazy time in terms of competitiveness for buyers trying to differentiate themselves, and and now things are changing with like interest rates, and also lots of counsel your client on, see what their situation is, what are they looking at doing with the property. People are investing in properties as an addition to buying as their homes, so it's kind of just balancing all those things.
Yes. You want to do the ending now, or do you have any more questions?
Yeah, we can wrap it up. I think we've talked through everything.
Yep. All right, I'll give a minute of silence. And then
Okay. A whole minute?
Just sit back.
We have time for reflection.
Yeah.
Well, no, we can sit here and ask Andrew. So
No, I'm just meditating, guys.
You're a Gamecock fan,
Yeah.
right? And I know
Absolutely.
you're down there like most of us on Saturday afternoons watching football when we're home. So, we had a decent season last year. Got the 7 wins. So what's your prediction for the upcoming 2022 season?
Gonna win every tailgate. That's where it all starts. But I'm like Gamecock Larry. If you ever listen to the local 12-0, we're gonna win by 30. But I'm pretty excited. Coach Beamer is, I think, somebody everybody's behind, and I'm excited to see where things go. I like everybody else to look at the schedule and kind of go through it. I'm like, oh man, feels like 8-4 right there. So then you're trying to figure out how that comes to be. And Arkansas week 2, and they got a great dynamic quarterback, and so it gets you nervous because you're already looking at Georgia in week 3, and and then just trying to take care of business. But with Kentucky, Missouri, everybody. So but I'm pumped. We'll see what Spencer Rattler has at quarterback, and that's pretty exciting. A guy that was top 5 NFL prospect at one point, and still looking as a first-round pick. So we'll see. So pretty exciting times.
So what are your thoughts on the last game of the year?
Oh man, hey, let's go. Gamecock Larry would say, Cox by 90.
Cox by 90. In Death Valley, right?
Yeah, right. That's right. So man, we'll see.
We'll hope. All right.
Yeah, well.
That's
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, we appreciate you being here, and thank you for the great advice for the people that are listening in, especially the young folks, the first-time home buyers. And I have to give you kudos. We do a first-time home buyers workshop. And you're getting ready to join us when we do that, and so we appreciate you just jumping in there and helping educate these folks to make this a much easier process.
Yeah, absolutely. I figured after you guys have me on, y'all might so we don't want you to talk to them. No, I'm glad to. Glad to help.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and we'll look forward to seeing you around.
The Cola guys would like to thank Loveland Coffee for allowing us to record our episodes at their location in the heart of Irmo, South Carolina. They pride themselves with providing the best coffee, best customer service, and focusing on serving their community. If you're just looking to grab a mug to go, or stay and enjoy the ambiance, or purchase a bag of their roasted beans for home brewing, you can't beat Loveland Coffee. Thanks to Beach and his staff for all they do for their clients and the Irmo community.